So you joined the faculty at Northwestern as assistant professor in 1989. Um, and, since we're talking about tenure in particular and the process of tenure, what was your understanding of tenure as a first year assistant professor? What assumptions, if any, did you kind of walk in with? And how was it explained to you in a formal capacity when you were hired, or just informally in hallway conversations um, at that time? Like, what did you think tenure was and how was it explained?
Well, I think, look, every person who's gone through this kind of experience is going to have their own. I mean, what is that opening line from Anna Karenina, that every happy family is the same and every family that's miserable and has their own unique story? I think it's something like that. And I'm sure there's particulars here. Part of what happened to me in my first job, which was at Northwestern University, um, and part of what made me a little angry was I had done what I had been advised to do. And in retrospect, the things I had been advised to do were not the things that I needed to have done. And I mean, I'll tell you, for example, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the particulars of this, but my expectation when I got my first job at Northwestern was that I would, if I did what I was required to do, which was produce a very, very strong, creditable first book, that I would be tenured. And other people had been tenured on that, in some cases less than that, and people were tenured as I was coming through on that basis. And part of what I think happened was uh, while I was, in fact, the year I was up for tenure, which was in fact a year earlier than I needed to be up, um, Northwestern hired a president named Henry Beenan who came from Princeton. And I can remember this, it's going to sound like I'm making this up, but one of the very first talks he gave, and I remember reading about it in the student newspaper, was he started that fall, I think, or maybe the winter, had just gone through my department with a vote that I subsequently learned, because all of this you learn, was I think 30-1. And I'd gone through, the Northwestern at that time had an ad hoc committee that made then a recommendation to the tenure committee. And I had a unanimously positive recommendation from the ad hoc committee as well. A new president arrives at that, and one of the very first speeches he gave was how his first of Northwestern was that the university was vastly over tenured, and that at Princeton tenure was extremely exacting and the exception rather than the rule, and that if Northwestern really did aspire to be this university on the stature of Princeton, it needed to tighten its tenure. And I remember thinking, well, that's bad timing. And then, it's going to sound like I'm making this stuff up, but I remember this pretty vividly too. The other person who had been the candidate for the then sitting provost. And so he left because I think, that's how these things work. And I read a speech or a statement from the new president saying how he had decided that one of his deans would be promoted, one of the deans of one of the schools would be promoted to the office of provost, but he first needed to see who had the highest standards before he made his decision. So I remember thinking, well, this is really bad timing, but I still didn't think I was in danger, right? And so the day that they waited. In fact, they waited literally to the last day of the quarter, and then put these envelopes in our mailbox. And there were, in fact, three of us up at history that time. Two of us were denied. I think there were um, the 11 people had gotten to the stage that we had all gotten the previous year, and all 11 were tenured. And this year, I think the university fired 6. So it was clearly partly a bad timing thing. But one of the things that I clearly had failed to do was, I hadn't like gone out and done conference papers and conference presentations and stuff like this. And I was literally by a senior colleague, don't bother to do that. Everyone knows that that's meretricious, his word. Stay home and write your book. And, and then, of course, one of the things that comes back is why is this person not doing more conference presentations? So, I really felt like I was very, very badly advised. In fairness, I suppose, to my colleagues, they were advising me about the workings of a system that changed literally the moment that I came up.